There are hearts bigger than planets, black hearts that absorb light, hope, and dust particles that eat comets and space probes. Motionless, sullen dirigibles, they hang in the empty space between galaxies. We can't see them, but we know they're there, fattening. They give off a kind of light, but it is a backwards light that races inward away from the onlooker to hide itself from view. So this light, whose color we would so much like to know, maybe it's a color we haven't seen before, for which we must sprout new eyes, looks more like darkness than any ordinary darkness, and seems to suck the sight from our eyes and make itself visible in the form of a blind spot. Dark hearts, heavier than weight itself. Too heavy for reality to bear, they punch a hole in it and sink through into the dream underneath. They throb dully at the bottom of a gravity well. We might sit by the side and drop a line if we knew what kind of bait to use, but if we hooked the heart, could we lift it? And if the melancholy behemoth sounded of its own accord, bothered by our flies and sinkers, and we netted it, wouldn't it collapse on the deck, exhausted by its own gravity? No, it is unkind to wrest these hearts out of hiding. Toss pennies in the hole instead. Dump a martini off the poop of the spaceship. Blow a kiss through a porthole and clear off, friend. The heart warps everything around it. Where nothing is, emptiness itself is twisted, its features distorted beyond all recognition. This is why people rail against the heart. It is bad enough to change everything that is, but when nothingness itself is altered, something must be done. If we hold ourselves still, at the moment the year turns over, we can feel a faint beat. That is the black heart continuing its patient, serious work. What work? I am trying to find out. I have given my life to observing the hearts. Yeah, I was born in the Philippines, just outside Manila. My father was then in the diplomatic service, and so I lived there when I was really a baby. I don't remember it, I was too young. And then moved to Virginia, and then moved to Yugoslavia, which I do remember. Those are some of my earliest memories, are of Belgrade. And then at that point, my father got a bit disenchanted with the diplomatic service and decided to become a teacher in the public schools, along with my mother. And so he left the Foreign Service and we drove across country to Berkeley. And that's where we took up residence. I was a very strange child. I kind of haunted. I was very uncomfortable with other people socially. Not in my family, strangely enough. I was pretty loud and bossy and theatrical, but in the outside world, I was a stealth agent, and I just tried to escape notice and kind of crawl around the edges. I read all the time, and I explored mysterious places. I was always trying to find the perfect hideout, like on a neighbor's roof or behind a fence, crawling into weird little holes and trespassing. I don't know, I think I have maybe the problem of a lot of white people in America of feeling like I have no specific cultural heritage, But maybe even more than most people, because I don't even really feel grounded in America so much. My earliest memories aren't of America, they're of other places. And I have this sense of being a sort of permanent nomad because of that. Just like I've always been on the move. So I don't know, my sense of heritage is really grounded more in the books I grew up reading than in some sense of community.
So do you go exploring a lot, like around the city?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lately, especially, my boyfriend and I both really like, trespassing. Or just finding really weird, broken down places that aren't part of the sort of public face of the city. So we keep coming up with these projects to go explore some vacant lot that we've seen from the side of the subway or something. And sometimes it's not interesting, but sometimes it's really great. The railroad track I'm taking you to was right outside in the back of the house, one of the houses he grew up in. So that's how we knew it was there. And we went for an expedition there, and I found these disgusting old doll heads. Oh. And in fact, a whole bunch of doll parts from the same dolls, all kind of covered in muck. So it's a sort of a mysterious place.
So why do you like to go and find these places, like the trespassing, the sort of the hidden places of New York? What do you think attracts you to?
It's hard to answer because I find them so intrinsically interesting that I don't that I don't question it. I mean, I think it's partly just that they're secret, so I'm finding something that nobody else knows, which is always more interesting than being, the millionth visitor to the Grand Canyon or something. I feel like I'm kind of creating it with my attention in some strange way, because I'm seeing what's interesting about it where other people have overlooked it. But I also like grunge more than I like polish. I like the look of things that are decaying and that have acquired their beauty, if you can see their beauty, through accident and the gradual wearing away of time rather than through some kind of intentional act of design. I also, I'm kind of a scavenger, and I like strange junk, like old broken dolls and pieces of machines and old signs and things. And those are the kind of places where you just find piles of strangeness that people have thrown over the sides of bridges or out their back window or whatever. Where are we? Avenue H. Oh, we're really close. haven't looked on the map to see how far it goes that way. It goes all the way to the water in that direction. And this way, I think it just goes up through Queens and maybe continues. Maybe, I think it's some kind of freight railroad or something. And it must occasionally run, because this isn't completely rusted. But I've never seen a train. So I walk along here and I'm just like, I keep thinking I'm gonna find something amazing. Because look at all this junk.
What do you look for? Or just like anything that catches your eye? Like,
I don't know, yeah. There are a lot of decayed toys that I like to look at because they kind of look like dead bodies, but in a really ambiguous, weird way because they weren't ever alive.
right.
Which is something I find interesting. And a decapitated teddy bear.
Or bunny.
Or bunny. Good point, yeah. Could be. I have this fascination with the sort of the edges of things and the spaces in between things and the way there's never just a cut. It always kind of leaks in, you know, like this strange, I don't know, material ooze from the city that's kind of spilled into this crack zone. I think I'm fascinated by the way everything gets sort of mixed up in those and sort of blurred in those in-between places. And it's true at the edges too, you know, there's this kind of impure territory that I think is the most interesting space. So let's have a meeting.
Wow. Did you come hang out here?
Yeah, I just sit here with my homies. No. I think it's kind of a creepy place to sit. But I love the melancholy reindeer and those three guys.
Yeah, the three graffitis are gorgeous.
My chair is gonna collapse.
Uh-oh. So how does a place like this inspire you? Does it?
You mean inspires my writing?
Yeah.
It doesn't directly, but for example, the strange sadness of that reindeer kind of mixed with the way that it's a kind of funny artifact of this consumer culture that's really trivial and absurd to me in a lot of ways. Failure of your own imagination to look at the sort of cheesy, superficial world of ads and mainstream media mediated representations of things and common sense, and think that that's boring and that's all there is, because it seems to me that there's this, and kids feel it all the time, that there's something really kind of always melancholy and inexpressible, kind of goolily flowing under the surface. Nobody's enemy and nobody's friend, it hides its heart in a locked box, a secret stash, maybe a hollow tree in the woods under a bee's nest, maybe a tower room on a glass mountain, on a wolf-run isle in a sea ringed by volcanoes and desert wastes. The fetus always keeps its balance. Someone observed that the land seemed disarranged, bent treetops, flattened grass, weeds dragged out of their seats, clods dislodged. Tedious speculations about crop circles and barrows and Andean landing strips made the rounds. Of course, we knew the fetus's little feet dragged when he walked. We had seen the marks in the sandbox at the park. We should have noticed the resemblance, but we resisted the idea that the fetus was only a transient resident. We had grown accustomed to, even proud of it, the fetus was a municipal landmark. It had put our town on the map and filled it with visitors so that our children had a chance to envy the latest haircuts, and our adults, the latest cars and sexual arrangements. Since the fetus arrived, none of us has loved without regret, fucked without apprehension, yearned without doubt. We break out in a rash when a loved one comes near because we know the fetus is there too, waiting for us to prove to it everything it already knows. Behind one another's eyes, it is the fetus we love, floating in the pupil like a speck, like a spy. It's looking over your shoulder, making cold drinks even colder, and it doesn't care what promises you've made. We think we want affection, sympathy, fellow feeling, but it is the cold and absolute we love. And when we misplace that in one another, we struggle for breath. Through the pupil's little peephole, we look for it, the shapeless, the inhuman. My book's called The Melancholy of Anatomy, and it's a collection of short stories that are all about different bodily substances, body parts, but also things that ooze from the body. And each story in it reimagines one of those substances in a kind of surreal way. So say sperm hop through a landscape, blood wells up from the ground, milk rains from the sky, that sort of thing. From pretty early on, I had this sense of the body as a site of contention. And I think mainly because I had such a problematic relationship to being a little girl. Wasn't at all sure I wanted to grow up to be a woman. Didn't really want to grow up to be a man either. So I was really thinking a lot about what, my body just felt like in an animal kind of way, like me. But I began to be more and more aware that what was reflected back to me from the culture about my body was different. And and that I was supposed to take on that information and kind of alter myself in relation to it. I have this really strong sense of my body as something phantasmatic almost, as this kind of creative construction that's a kind of collaboration between how I see myself and how I imagine the world sees me. And all that doesn't have a whole lot to do with my understanding of kind of the meat of me. And I find that disjunction between the sort of meat self and the phantasmatic projected image self really interesting. And in all my work, I think I'm kind of exploring that strange slippage between the stuff, which is this kind of formless raw material that's sort of gooey and resistant to propriety, but even to interpretation, even to talking about, and the kind of public and articulate self. Seems like, from a certain perspective, everything I've written has been kind of thinking about the sort of slippery zone in between between the self and the outside world. And specifically, at the same time, it's sort of reflecting on how much I feel like the body is written, and also how much I feel like written things, books and texts in general, are in some way bodily. So a lot of my work is establishing a metaphorical connection between the text as a body and the body as a text. Somebody's art project happened here.
Let's go. Let's go.
It's not coincidence that I'm in Brooklyn. I always liked Brooklyn when I first moved. I mean, when I first visited New York, 20 years ago or whatever, I was most drawn to Brooklyn. And I think part of that is that it replicates my childhood experience, in that I think the relationship of Berkeley to San Francisco is kind of similar to the relationship of Brooklyn to Manhattan. It's sort of funkier and a little smaller and more neighborhoody, and not so urban, but it has this interesting sort of dialectical relationship to the big city. Is this a boat?
I think it's a boat.
This is a boat.
In the hangar.
In the airport.
Ooh, look at those huge towers.
be able to do something beautiful with it. I mean, even it the way it is great. The sad thing is they always have to keep people from getting killed, which is appropriate, I guess, but you can contrive to die almost anywhere.
That's true.
I sort of felt like I had to carry my world around with me. And here, so much weirdness, so much interesting stuff happens in the outside world that it's actually more interesting to be sort of porous and pay attention to what's going on around me rather than to kind of pull down my shutters and, obsess about books or whatever. So I've done a lot of exploring. And lately, in fact, more than before, I've started trying to find the stranger parts of New York, just weird little warehouses in Red Hook and half-abandoned cemeteries. And I go on these expeditions on my bike to remote parts of Brooklyn just to see what's there. Whereas Brooklyn, the different parts of Brooklyn feel so different from each other. And some of them don't even feel like they're part of a stereotypical vision of New York at all. And yet there's still, because it's such a huge, bustling city, there's still that sense of like a circulatory system moving through everything and keeping things moving. And so I like that, the variety and the sort of ramshackle quality of Brooklyn. Like it isn't, the property values are not so high everywhere, so things aren't maintained quite as well, and there are bits that are sort of falling into decay much more visibly than in a lot of parts of Manhattan. Only when it is time to make love must you bind the fetus tight, lock it in its traces, close all the doors and windows. For at that moment the fetus will rise in its bonds, larger and more majestic, and its great eyes will open, and inside them you could see all of space rushing away from us. As it is, it is. The fetus is sublime at that moment. Set guards and they will respectfully retreat. Dogs, and they will lie down with their heads between their paws, blinking. And even if the fetus is in tight restraint, you will feel it risen in your pleasure bed. The air will turn blue and burn like peppermint on your wet skin, and the shadows under the bed and the corners of the room will take on the black vastness and the finality of space. You will continue loving, because that is our human agenda, what is set for us to do. Though we know the fetus, whom we also love, is suffering in its straps. Indeed, we make the fetus suffer again and again, though we are full of regret and pity, and these feelings swell in our chests and propel us together with ever greater force, so we seem to hear the fetus's giant cry, deafening every time we slam together. We love cruelly and in pain. I think I was working my way up gradually, actually, to a sense of a written project as something that could incorporate different modes besides just pure text. And it probably had its origins, actually, in my first experiments in hypertext, because that was, even though I had quite a sort of fragmented and experimental sense of narrative already, it was really my first kind of practical experience of composing something out of a lot of disparate pieces and trying to make a project work without building a line that went one way through the whole thing, but rather thinking of it as this kind of patchwork of all sorts of different kinds of materials. And that project included some drawings and also quotes from many other sources, as well as my own original text. So I was already thinking there about how you could define a work as something sort of more inclusive and an amorphous than a book ordinarily is. About a year ago, I put out a call in Cabinet Magazine, which is a small art magazine, for people who would volunteer to have one word of a story of mine called Skin tattooed on their bodies. And actually, originally, I kind of imagined that this was sort of a conceptual work of art. The call itself might just be this, all that ever came of the project. But to my amazement, people started writing me and volunteering. And so I quickly realized that I had to actually make this project happen, which was going to involve a huge amount of secretarial work and correspondence, which continues to this day. So I have 2,095 words in the story, so I need 2,095 volunteers. So, I was the first word tattooed, September 8th last year. So I'm the title. I'm the only all uppercase word in the story. And I got it at the same time as the very first word, which is my friend Sarah, and her word is if, the first word of the story. But I can't tell you any more in order because that would be revealing the story. And one of the things I promise in my proposal is that I'm never going to publish the story in any form, not even a summary. It'll only ever be read by the people who are actually participating in the project, because one of the ideas behind it is that it's a mortal work of art, which means that it will die out as its participants die, and it'll gradually erode and change as more and more of them kind of drop out of the world until it vanishes completely.
People, for example, ask me, what does it mean? And I'm like, how should I know? I'm free, in a way. So that's very rewarding.
And what is your word?
My word is of.
Oh.
So they're like, of what?
Of.
Of.
That's cool. Of. And have you read the story?
Nobody's read the story. Or have they? No?
The first word has read the story.
So you don't even know where you are within the story in terms of like...
No, I could be all the ofs and none of them in a way.
No,
right?
you're only one of.
There's only one of for me.
Well, no, only one of is you. But you could form a little team of ofs with the other ofs.
I could, but it's cool.
very new project, the Shelley Jackson Vocational School for Ghost Speakers and Hearing Mouth Children. It's a school designed to teach children with speech impediments to channel the voices of the dead. And I'm setting up a website that will be as nearly as possible like a real virtual school, so that people can come to it and download exercises that they can perform in order to earn credits toward a degree. I have the desire to make it as much as possible right in between fictional and real. It becomes very unclear when you're surfing the web what's to be taken seriously and what isn't. It's very hard to tell whether you're on a kind of authoritative site or whether you're on some parody or some crackpot's website, and I really like that. Anyway, so this project is partly about a kind of intervention into the lives of readers, and kind of allowing them to intervene in the project as well and contribute to it and kind of bring it to life with their action. But it also involves a lot of different kinds of creative work on my part, because large sections of it will be sort of like fiction, will be written, but other sections will look more like diagrams in a science experiment or something. And there are actual physical objects that I've made. In fact, I could find one.
Where does your interest in the dead come from? Because, I mean, it is, you know, for the school, it's obviously an important part. But then also in the Skin Project, I mean, death is an element to it.
That's a really big, huge question. I think it has lots of different origins. I mean, in the case of the school project, I'm thinking a lot about language as being kind of haunted already. And that's something I've thought about for a long time, because there's this sense to me in which a book is kind of like a haunted or possessed object, because it has this materiality like, you know, like a haunted staircase or something. But it's sort of infused with the soul of the person who wrote it. And so it has this really weird ambiguous status where it's kind of like a living thing, but it's kind of dead as well. It's like a dead thing that can talk to you. So I think of language as already in this kind of zombie state in between the living and the dead. And I just want to bring that a little more to the front when I write about haunting. But I think it also relates to a sense of our material existence in the world as being already kind of haunted in all sorts of ways. I mean, maybe even some kind of relationship to my body as this stuff, which is kind of like a thing, like an inanimate object, but one that I've haunted with my ghost in some weird way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I think some kind of perception that I'm a reanimated corpse, or an animated corpse, a pre-corpse animated body. I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, just as the sense that there's something kind of like I'm fascinated by materiality, the way that like the textures of things and the surfaces and the different, grit or slime of them. But at the same time, by these really immaterial things that register on a whole different level. So much of my work is about simultaneously emphasizing the kind of solidity or gooiness of something, and its weirdly haunted quality. I think actually the truth is that reading includes a lot more various kinds of behaviors than librarians imagine or even approve of necessarily. I mean, I did a lot of odd things with books growing up. You use them for surfaces to write on. You can stage doll games on top of them. People routinely hide things inside them or write in them. And those are all part of the experience of reading in some expanded sense, in my view. So, again, I'm just interested in kind of inviting some of this and using it in a way that integrates it back into the work in a more organic and interesting way than as just these sort of illegitimate interruptions that people do on the side, sort of, and get scolded for if they have parents who are like, never treat your book that way. Where we live, the skies are heavy with sleep. Sometimes high-flying jets come down encrusted with it, like bees dusted with pollen. Fielded by Midas and thrown home, how beautiful these shining apparitions are. They roll unsteadily to a stop, transformed into fairy tale coaches. A crack opens. A patch of golden coral swings aside. Stairs descend, and then the baffled pilot emerges like a new Aphrodite from a peculiar Edenic shell. Permanent banks and shoals of sleep drowse above us. They can be thick enough, it is whispered, to slow a plane to a standstill and hold it fast above the earth. Some planes disappear and are never found. Some fall to earth, but no human remains are discovered in the wreckage. Many years ago, a pilot landed a plane alone and insisted forever after that everyone else got out above. Forced to open the emergency exits in mid-flight and stepped out into a landscape of gilt towers and archways. My children are already dreaming, so young. At their age, I kept telling myself, a better time will come. I can endure this moment. And when the next moment came, I found I could endure that one too, and so on, to this day. But I don't think less of them for making their escape. We are all waiting for our chance. Out of care and duty leaps the shocking blossom of the new, vibrant, imperious, reeking of pollen. It is a subpoena, a lure, a gauntlet. If we are honest and brave, we have little choice. We kick over our happy home and go. We step out of the airplane onto a golden cloud. The sleep is falling steadily. I could go out and gather it. I could pat it together. My hands would know what to do. I used to be a pilot, did I mention that? I would like to make one more flight. This time I would not let my chance go by. I could leave my life. I could change completely. Is it time?